Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a memorandum of understanding with the County of San Mateo and the City of South San Francisco for the Navigable Slough Feasibility Study and appropriating $40,000 from the general fund.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Before we discuss the item tonight, I'd like to provide a brief update on the status of the FEMA flood maps. Since it's somewhat related to this Navigable Slough feasibility study. As you're aware, staff has been continuously working and coordinating with FEMA since we learned about this flood maps, at the end of 2014, and which included majority of the Bel Air neighborhood into the flood zone. And staff came to council, recommended to award a contract to a consultant, Moffitt & Nichols, to provide technical assistance and provide a status update on this FEMA item about 5 times since January of 2015. So just to recap here, this slide shows the flood inundation area in the Bel Air neighborhood based on FEMA analysis. And there are three sources of flooding. One is Navigable Slough, located in South San Francisco. The tide gate structure at the end of San Bruno Channel, owned and maintained by the county, and as well as the San Francisco Airport levees. The shaded area within the red oval is the Bel Air neighborhood that is being included in the FEMA maps. And Moffitt & Nichols assisted the city in completing the more detailed analysis, what you call a two-dimensional model that took into account time duration of the tides and terrain and compared it to the FEMA 1D or their static model, determine whether there were any flood inundation that can be reduced. Since the detailed hydraulic analysis completed by Moffitt & Nichols shows substantial reduction in flood inundation areas within the Bel Air neighborhood, staff, along with the council support, submitted an appeal to FEMA. And although we are unsure of the final outcome, we believe that the submission of an appeal was necessary in order to support many of our residents living in the Bel Air neighborhood who will be financially impacted through the mandatory requirement to purchase flood insurance once their properties are mapped into the flood zone. So this slide shows the comparison side by side between FEMA's mapping and the city's hire firm, Moffitt & Nichols analysis. And the FEMA mapping is on the left and the Moffitt & Nichols results on the right. As you can see, majority of the properties south of Pine Street are all removed from the flood maps using the 2D hydraulic modeling approach. And however, the location that remains is the neighborhood north of Pine Street, which I'll discuss a bit later on how that area can be potentially removed as well. Currently, the flood maps for the entire San Mateo County are on hold until the appeal for both South San Francisco and San Bruno is resolved. Just for your curiosity, out of all the 20 agencies in the peninsula, only 2 agencies submitted an appeal to FEMA. On March 21st of this year, we had staff, along with Brian Perkins from the Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office, attended a meeting with FEMA representative to discuss this 2D modeling approach and the next steps, which is the scientific resolution panel process. And also in attendance were staff from the County of Alameda Flood Control District, the County of Santa Clara, and Port of Oakland. FEMA wanted to discuss with all these agencies because most of the agencies are either in an appeal period or have their appeal denied or intended to submit an appeal based on to 2D modeling approach. So during the discussion, all agencies mentioned to FEMA that their FEMA 1D approach is very conservative, and the 2D modeling provided more accurate results. FEMA provided the agencies information in regards to the SRP process and mentioned that it would take approximately 30 to 60 days for panel selection and 90 days after to convene a panel. Both South San Francisco and San Bruno has yet to hear anything from FEMA in regards to the panel selection since the meeting. In regards to public outreach, I know both the city and Brian Perkins have requested FEMA to conduct a community meeting with the public earlier this year, since FEMA had conducted these type of community meetings for other agencies by bringing their representatives to answer questions related to the flood study and flood insurance requirements. FEMA is reluctant to provide any of their staff to be present in these community meetings until the maps are determined to be accurate. So neither FEMA nor the Congresswoman or Brian Perkins, advises the community meeting be held without FEMA's participation. So in regards to schedule, since the city is currently in the SRP stage, the SRP panel needs to be established first. Then FEMA would issue what is called a letter of final map determination. Then 6 months after that, the final maps will be issued. Then the insurance requirements will be will start 6 months after the final maps are finalized. Therefore, residents have approximately more than a year before having to purchase the flood insurance. So how's the FEMA maps related to the Navigable Slough feasibility study, and how is it going to benefit the city of San Bruno? So, as presented earlier, the slough, was determined to be one of the flood sources, on the FEMA map. So, Nickel analyzed that the south bank of the slough, elevation is lower, so it overtops, and the water is assumed to be coming down along Shaw Road and into city of San Bruno and flood the 7th Avenue Walnut, neighborhood. So improvements to the Navigable Slough will potentially remove the properties around the 7th and Walnut. So that entire area will potentially be removed if the flap gate is installed there. So the slough was also identified as being vulnerable in the sea level rise study that was conducted as part of the San Bruno and Coma Creek resiliency study. And that study also indicated that improvements to the slough will also be required to prevent flooding from sea level rise in South San Francisco and San Bruno. So here's a closer look of the Navigable Slough. It's an unimproved earthen channel that drains, a small area of South San Francisco and passes under 101 and South Airport Boulevard in concrete box culverts. And so the study, it's a collaborative effort between South San Francisco, San Bruno, and county. And the county will be managing the project with support from both cities. And the work will focus primarily on assessment of the slough to determine whether the installation of the tie gate or flap gate on the existing box culvert is feasible in terms of flood control aspects. And it will also evaluate the potential habitat impacts and determine the requirement for CEQA. The county has requested proposals for the study, and the detailed scope of work is included in the staff report. And the study is anticipated to be completed within 12 weeks following the county notice to proceed issuance. And then the next phase of work after that will be for the design and subsequently construction of the facility, and then accreditation or certification of the new tie gate and flap gate structure with FEMA. And grant opportunities will likely be pursued to support the construction cost as well. As for fiscal impact, the memorandum of understanding is being requested by the county for the cost sharing services between the county and both agencies, South San Francisco and San Bruno. So each agency will be contributing $40,000 to perform the study and initiate the environmental permitting discussions with the regulatory agency. So, and currently there are no funding that can be used to cover the cost of this contract, and staff is recommending to appropriate the amount of $40,000 from the general fund. So this concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Through the chair. Wanted to thank you for all the hard work and all staff's work in getting us to where we are right now. And I'm definitely in favor of this project. If we could get the remaining residents out of potentially the flood zone, that's great. But speaking for those properties that are north of Pine, they can staff remind me of how often they've been contacted or how they've been contacted to let them know that they're the most vulnerable in our city in the flood zone, where the other ones south of Pine, we're hopefully going to be successful in having the 2D model approved. So I just feel that if not telling somebody that they're a prime target in their property, and that while we know it now and waiting until something's finally determined, I think that is, I'm not in favor of doing that. I'd like to give them proper advance notice now, even though it's not final, but it's, if I lived there, I would want to know. I wouldn't want to wait a year from now and then be told, well, Mr. Medina, your property is in this new FEMA zone. And, well, when did that happen? And they said, well, it started in 2014. So those are my comments.
Through the chair, can you clarify, Jimmy, could you go back to the other map that shows the flood area? So the one on the left is FEMA's rendition of it, if nothing, because all the things that were there are not certified by FEMA. They don't acknowledge that the airport is there and that all those things that the airport has and all that stuff. The one on the right is the consultants saying that this is more real, and what you're saying is if we approve this study, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we approve this study, hopefully the study would show that if you do the improvements on the Navigable Slough, then even that part will be gone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I don't want people to get confused. If we tell the people who FEMA thinks might be flooded, it would be everybody on the left. Not the right, the left side. All those people. The right side is... Who we're fighting for. No, we're fighting for everybody, and hopefully there won't be anybody in that area. So I think that's why Mr. Perkins and Jackie's office and everybody we've talked to is saying, we're going to tell somebody, well, you might be in FEMA, you might not, we don't know. You might have to do this, you might have to do it in a year, you might have to do it in 2 years. I don't know what the point of it would be to, beyond what we've done. I mean, we're telling people now this is the possibility. We're telling people, we've told people in focus, we've told people in I don't know how many meetings, I think 5 public meetings.
We've been in front of this council 5 times previously since the first time was January 27th, 2015.
So we've sent them, well, but we've sent, everyone gets focus. Every property owner gets focus, and the focus article says this is what's happening. I mean, my mother lives on 5th, my brother lives on 2nd, across the street from Mr. Rico over there. It's like, should I, beyond the focus, when my mom got focus, she read it and said, well, what should I do, call my insurance agent? I said, well, no, because we don't know yet. And so it's like, anyway, what the point of all of what I'm saying is, we have told people, we have told the public in general, we have sent information out on focus. I'm not sure it's a good idea to walk door to door or whatever else you would propose to let people know something that's so nebulous yet. I mean, maybe we could, as soon as we get some kind of more concrete information, then I would say absolutely, and I'll go help knock on doors. But to go tell people right this minute that maybe, maybe not, we don't know, and they'll say, what's the date? Well, we don't know. It might be 6 months. It might be 3 months. It's just too unnerving to me. So anyway, that's my opinion.
I just want to add in that I agree, and I've been concerned from the very beginning, and Mr. Rico has been diligent in making sure he's understanding this. Now it's looking like a year to 2 years, and yes, once we get closer to the decision and we've exhausted all efforts, along with our elected officials, then we reach out to those residents and make sure that they know and are prepared to know.
Mr. Rico.
Robert Rico, 7th Avenue. Just a question: how effective do you feel the notice in the your quarterly mailing to these people? Are they reading it? Are they? I would think they would come to some of these meetings and try and find out, even though it's a year, the Focus magazine, even though it's a year or 2 years out before you really know the the final. I'm just not comfortable with the extent that they are being informed of the situation that you're discussing and that you're constantly being updated on. Thank you.
Mr. Regal, if I could just make a comment. As far as I'm concerned, there is literally a handful of people, Mr. Medina, you included, that are asking about this. And I have a real hesitancy about sending out a mixed message when we don't have the answers. If you want to have a public meeting, what are you going to tell people? This is a situation, but we don't know. So given the fact that we may know well in advance, over a year in advance, I mean, that's fine. But we haven't heard any big outcries. We haven't heard, anybody that's really worried other than literally a handful of people who are asking a question that we can't answer.
So, but Focus isn't printed in Spanish. And a lot of people live in that area, speak Espanol. And so they're going to get Focus, and they're not going to read it because they can't read it. So a fact sheet listing what we did, one page of where we're at, and we're sharing the information that we know. And it's printed in Spanish.
I get it.
That's all, but that's okay, that's what I would like to do. If I don't have support on it, then...
No, it's not you don't have support. This is not just some one-page fact sheet. This is very complex stuff. And how do you explain that to someone that's, especially what you're saying, is someone that doesn't speak English well? How do we really portray this without them sitting right here and going over this map closely, and then all the consultants' arguments, and then the arguments that are coming from FEMA, and that whole bureaucracy. And I get it. Until we have something more concrete that we can, rally to these residents, yeah, I'll be right there also to make sure that every single resident gets notification. But until then, I think you're going to just scare them. I think you just scare them, and it could end up being, and I'm hopefully confident that it turns out to be nothing. And but until we get there, yeah, I'm hoping I'm confident we'll have enough time to alert these residents.
The item here is regarding the Slough feasibility study. Would someone like to?
I'll adopt the resolution.
Excuse me. Thank you. Vice Mayor Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Yes.
Councilmember Rico Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell?
Yes.
Mayor Ruane?
Yes.